Slide 1. Exchange is a central topic in economics. Over time, and with much discussion and thought, economists have built a narrative that I will present in these first few lectures. Slide 2. Here is the list of economists I will include. In the future, I may add more, but considering these economists already gives us a very rich narrative that we can use to explore the idea of exchange. Slide 3. Adam Smith, who lived from 1723 to 1790, is often called the father of modern economics. He taught moral philosophy at the University of Glasgow, but his book, The Wealth of Nations, laid the foundation for how we think about exchange and markets. Slide 4. Smith's key insight was that wealth is generated by surplus, and that surplus arises from the division of labor. When people specialize in particular tasks, they become far more productive than if each person had to do everything for themselves. To illustrate the division of labor, Smith uses the example of a pen factory. Each worker specializes in part of the pen manufacturing process, and, by doing so, becomes very proficient, thus increasing the number of pens produced. Slide 5. When we look at modern examples like a software tech startup, we again see specialization. For example, early on, the firm may have a CEO, CTO, full-stack engineer, and a user interface and user experience designer. As the firm grows, more specialists will be added. Slide 6. But specialization does not occur on its own. Smith argued that it is only possible because of our natural human tendency to exchange. He wrote that the division of labor is the necessary consequence of our propensity to truck, barter, and exchange one thing for another. When people specialize, they become more dependent on others to fulfill their wants. Therefore, people specialize only when they can trade their surplus for what they now lack. Slide 7. We can start to model exchange as a series of transactions. At time t, person A gives person B a good G. At a later time, say t plus s, person B give person A a different good H. Both people agree to these transactions because they expect they will be better off. That is, each person gives up something of value to get something of greater value. These back-and-forth exchange transactions are the foundation of markets. Slide 8. Smith emphasized that the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. If the market is small, individuals cannot fully specialize because they become too dependent on others and cannot trade away their surplus. But as the market expands, more specialization is possible. Slide 9. Consider the following graph theoretical model of the extent of the market. If we move from 2 to 3 people, then each person can trade with 2 others, creating 6 direct transaction paths. The diagram on the left has arrows connecting each pair, illustrating all possible paths. As shown in the right diagram, we can compress the 2 arrows between 2 people into a single 2-directional line. Each direction represents a transaction path. Slide 10. The 3 graphs on this slide illustrate that the number of possible paths grows as the number of possible trading partners increases from 4 to 8 to 24 people. The growth rate is quadratic. As more people exchange goods and services, the number of direct transaction paths grows quadratically. For example, 4 people can generate 12 direct paths, as each person connects to 3 others. The arrows in the diagram show all 12 paths. With 8 people, the growth is even more dramatic. 8 times 7 gives 56 direct paths. You can see visually how quickly the number of transaction paths increase. And with 24 people, the formula gives us 24 times 23, or 552 possible paths. The diagram here becomes almost overwhelming, a dense mesh of arrows, showing how the number of direct transaction paths rises sharply as markets grow. Slide 11. Smith also recognized that exchange is not limited to direct transactions. Subgroups can coordinate multilateral transactions, which increase opportunities even further. In this slide, with 3 people, we have 6 direct transaction paths. On the right, we see a coordinator, the central hollow blue node. The coordinator arranges 6 additional paths from the 3 people to the coordinator and from the coordinator to the 3 people. We will use the idea of a coordinator often in this course. Slide 12. With 4 people, the number of possible coordinators for facilitated transactions goes up. First, note the left graph that shows that without coordinators, there are 12 direct transaction paths. But now there are also 4 subgroups of 3 people, each with their own coordinator. The red and blue coordinators each coordinate different groups of 3 people. The green and purple coordinators also coordinate different groups of 3 people. Each group can have 6 potential transaction paths to and from the coordinator, resulting in 24 additional paths. Slide 13. With 4 people, we can also add the orange quadrilateral coordinator, adding 8 additional transaction paths. If we add them all up, we get 12 direct paths plus 24 paths made by the trilateral coordinators plus 8 more paths made by the quadrilateral coordinator. This is a total of 12 plus 24 plus 8 potential transactions, which equals 44 paths. Slide 14. Slide 14 graphs the log of transaction paths as the number of people grows from 3 to 15. As expected, the number of direct paths grows quadratically, but once we add the coordinators, the number of paths grows exponentially. Remember, the y-axis is on a log scale. Slide 15. This leads to an important question. Who or what are these coordinators in practice? Stop the presentation and take a moment to think about this. If you don't, you're missing a learning opportunity. Slide 16. Who or what are these coordinators? They could be middlemen, like a grocery store that buys from many sellers and resells to many buyers. They could be an institution, like an auction, that brings a seller and many buyers together. They could be firms that arise when the market cost of organizing transactions is high. They could be contracts, including smart contracts on blockchains, where everyone negotiates and agrees to the transactions they will make. Each of these coordinators increases the extent of a market. Slide 17. This chart shows the size distribution of private sector firms in the United States. Notice that more than 3 million firms have just 1 to 4 employees. This is important. Even very small firms, often specializing in a narrow niche, can thrive by finding their place in the market. Slide 18. Firms will often start out small as entrepreneurial startups, and if they're successful, find their niche. At this point, they may grow in size, but as the chart suggests, this is very hard. In either case, all firms will attempt to expand the extent of their market, i.e., the number of transaction paths they facilitate. Smith's framework shows us how markets, specialization, and exchange work together. As markets expand, specialization increases, productivity rises, and wealth grows. Institutions and firms develop, and sometimes grow to manage the growing complexity of transactions. This is a good place to stop and take a break.